Meeting Wednesday, the 12th of May. Was running a little bit over time in starting because we had a committee meeting run this morning that went over time. So I'll now look to open the meeting at 2:38 p.m. And first item is leave of absence, and just like to put forward, move that leave of absence for Councillor Jones be accepted as he has family commitments. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We had the recognition of the traditional owners this morning, Councillor Duff. Thank you very much for that, for performing that on behalf of our council for the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. So having done that, we'll now move on. Any declarations of interest in relation to the items, councillors? Thank you. We'll now move on to confirmation of the minutes of the last Budget Committee meeting held last week on the 5th of May. At page 5, do we have a mover? Thanks, Councillor Potter. Second, thanks, Councillor Henshin. Those in favour?
Mr Mayor, I just wanted
sorry, Councillor Duff.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's not a change as a councillor. It's you want to talk about one of the items.
I thought we were going to have a workshop on that particular item. That it's the item regarding the community concessions, and it just appears in there that we've endorsed it as is.
Yeah, that was the resolution, and we discussed talking about it further. I've got, without pulling up my notes, about a workshop. We didn't put the workshop in the minutes, but there is further. Now, also in the questions, we've got a list of all the community groups that are on it. So we have actually, Selena, I can't claim credit for it, but the finance team have gone back and found that information. That hasn't been lost. That's coming back. That was what was moved at the meeting. So as it was moved. So that's all it is just a record. Now, whether you like it or not, it's a recommendation, and I'm probably not, hopefully this comes across in the right tone. Whatever the decision is, the decision. That was recommended at that. So it's when I say it's non-binding, it'll go up to the policy or wherever it comes from. It's got to come back to I'll call it a proper council meeting. My terminology is off. It'll come back to an ordinary meeting. But if there is further changes to be made to it, yeah, that can be. But we will bring it. We are bringing it back for further discussion. Is yes, absolutely. And if it gives comfort, rather than changing the minute, just as business arising, that we can just resolve. It'll be noted that there will be further discussion. If that's the feeling of the room, happy either way. We can do it workshop or committee meeting. Don't mind. Whatever. I don't think I said that the other week. Is whatever fits best.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Yeah, that's excellent. So, councillors, we have that there. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, so just following on from that,
Mayor,
Mr.
we'll just make a note, Linnell, between us have resolved that.
Resolved to. Can we perhaps could I suggest that we have a workshop?
As part of the workshop. Yep.
Great. We structure a workshop in relation to that item. The exemptions and concessions available to not-for-profit groups at a suitable time prior to the budget being adopted. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. CEO. 6.1, this is exemptions and concessions on various special, separate and utility charges, 2122 at page 4. Mr. CEO, just with this one, I might get you to lead us in on that in terms of a policy matter. Thank you. Agenda. My sincere apologies. I thought that was strange. 6.1 is the Office of the CEO budget, 2122 at item 12, and I will definitely hand over to you to talk to that one. So,
thanks, Mayor. So have we got it on the? We've got councillors. I'm just looking. Max, Selena, have we got the sheets that we handed out last week? Everyone's got those, or Monday? All right. Okay, so basically, councillors, very unorganised today. Tabled for information, so as Yeah, no, I've got him here somewhere. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you, Mayor. So the two budgets are presented for exec and PNC. We had a couple of questions. So would it be just to get I get my head straight? It'd be handy to. Do you want us to go through those questions first? That'd be good. Where's Tracy? So concessional. So we probably need you up here, Trace. Or is Max going to talk to it? Yep. You right?
Advertising and marketing within exec services. So I have had a bit of a look before I came down. Within the exec advertising, there's a number of monthly subscriptions. So through APN newspaper, Crow FM, Mergen Moments. So that's there's a full page for libraries. There's a half a page for the BP Dem and Duma. So there's a number of monthly subscriptions that come out of that. That's in the exec advertising. There's a News Limited. That's the Courier Mail monthly subscription. There's a Kingaroy Radio package. South Burnett Times, the advertising for the SB Times. And there's the SBRC News Updates page as well. That's a monthly subscription. So, yeah, it's really just a number of monthly advertising subscriptions that comes out of that one. Within the exec marketing, I don't know if you're happy for me to keep going. There was money spent on the media pack, some video advertising, some cinema advertising for the Christmas and school holidays, and some promotional products with our logo and alike on it. So there wasn't too much in that one.
Oh, that's all right. And we had the other one was subscriptions. Subscriptions year to date was showing at 24. So there has actually been one account that's come in. It was for ID, that property ID. It's the one with the regional census statistics. So we have had now for a couple of years. So that's a $10,000 license account. So that came in this last week. So that'll take that up. Well, when I say over budget, I think we had about 31.5 in there. So that's 34. The other ones were, Tracy, other subscriptions we have is... Oh, yeah, that didn't come out of subscriptions, though, did it? No. So the Dan and Steph was an opportunity cost that we grabbed for tourism this year. Yep. Yeah, well, I need you to microphone. The other subscriptions I was meaning that we have in that subscriptions budget, we've got a couple of other ones that we have each year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so just want to confirm, maybe Max. So 63185. This year to date actuals are 49,000, and we've got 90,000 in the budget. So has there been another cost code or something combined with that, or is that 90,000 accurate? Are we expecting to spend more in media advertising, or?
Is that, Max, is that the list you just read out? So we've got further accounts due to come in.
Yes, that's the list that I just read out with the monthly subscriptions. So year to date, since then it's about 53 right now. But potentially there's been some savings, some cost cutting this year. Tracy was saying that they've just tried to save money where they can, so potentially won't get to that full 90 this financial year.
We've been reviewing the media subscriptions that we've had and cut back in a couple of areas there. In conjunction with that, though, we also have 3 months' worth of expenditure to go as well, so there will be more expenditure in that area coming up.
Mr. Mayor. The other one is just which when the sale of rates come up, as it will in due course, and we have to advertise in the Courier Mail. The Courier Mail advertising will be $10,000, so that won't be. So that's just one big bite. So that'll come out of there as well.
Yeah, the other thing is just I think in terms of that we have tightened our belt this year on advertising and run a fairly only as needed program with the radios and the newspapers. I'm probably keen to speak to seeing us do a little bit more over the next 12 months. I'd particularly like to follow up on your desire, Councillor Shoemaker, to review that media policy, our media policy, and start to get our portfolio holders and our councillors out talking with the community, engaging with the community more through media channels. So we've been having some discussions about how we can make that happen, whether we need to start to increase some of the contracts to a more regular basis, perhaps extend some of the timeframes on those so that we can provide more opportunities for community engagement through those advertising media format outlets. So I was probably keen to probably leave 20-odd thousand extra in there to enable us to do that if we could, because I feel as though now we've got our corporate plan, we've got a strong message to sell to the community over the course of the next 3 years. So that was probably just my view on that, for what it's worth. Yeah.
So are you proposing that go to,
Oh, no, I was just proposing that with the extra 10 for the Courier Mail on the sale of land arrears, and also with the extra additional advertising we're going to need to do, I think we'll need the 90,000, to be honest, if I can say that. Yeah.
okay.
The and in answer to the Susan's staff and coordinator Tracy have done the first cut through on the media policy that's just sitting with me. That will be circulated by the end of this week for the council normal feedback comment. So there's not substantive changes to it. It's just been updated and will be take council's direction. So that's about to head off. So that one will be out by Friday.
Very good. Thanks, Mr. CEO. Okay, so councillors, any other questions on any line items there? I know one of the things we talked about, have we got that done now where we're going to build that one line of 130,000 for regional development into the budget, Mr. CEO? We're still planning to do that?
Yeah, we put in, so in the first quarter review, councillors will recall the original budget was amended in the first quarter review because we had the then submission from VSB for the 70, which was paid. And there was also some other initiatives at that point. We've put that in, so the overarching budget, sorry, after I scrabbled through, is only is 122 up on last year. So we've absorbed the 2.5% wage increase. We've got full staffing in the office of the CEO, the exec this year. Would like to, without any definitive decisions being made on how that breakup will be, I would like to leave it in there because it will give us one of the feedbacks I can give for this year. It was difficult. The Dan and Steph is a really good example. Now we've scratched and saved and we've brought the budget in to a degree under budget this year, and it's allowed us for those opportunity. So that was using a different RTO through Fraser Coast, but even though it's only a small amount of 12,000. It allows us to take those opportunity events that come across, but also council can give consideration to the initiatives it wishes to support. So if the money is in there, it's not that it'll be just frittered away, but most of those, well, it won't be frittered away, I can tell you that. But those initiatives, and particularly with the regional development strategy, it will have initiatives in it that may need to be resourced to go forward. So I would really like to leave that in there, Mr. Mayor, if I may. If that came out, we've absorbed CPI as far as all the material costs or everything else, plus also the wages costs. So the only difference in the exec budget really is if you put those two line items in there.
So, councillors, I'll just come to Councillor Shoemaker shortly to comment on this and other matters. So what we're talking about here is the 60,000 that we'd talked about for Baido and 70,000 for VSB. What we're talking about, rolling that up into $130,000 one line item called regional development, and then that again gives council flexibility to look at how you'd like to allocate and spend that alongside the regional development strategy over the next 12 months. So it's not locking us into anything. We're not committing to any of those organisations, just leaving it there and giving that flexibility for council in accordance with what Councillor Shoemaker shared last week. So might just go to you now, Councillor Shoemaker, on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fully supportive of that approach. And that will give council the time we need, bringing down the strategy, to really think about how we're going to implement it. So thank you. I just wanted to, CEO Mark wondered, our VIC's look to be running really lean. I just wondered if you could run us through the various budgets for each of the VICs, and if there is any requirement there that I've missed that's been included, or whether they're still running quite lean.
If they were bacon, they would have no fat. So rather than each individual VIC council, can I just consolidate them because the issues are pretty much the same. The one thing is there was a readjustment last year for some of the properties, picked up some of the costs out of them, the electricity and things like that. So we have cleaning. So we have noted even in our year to dates when Coordinator Tracy's been going through the monthly accounts that there's been some charges, and so they'll be reallocated back across. We're always on the lookout for those double ups in case it gets just put to the wrong number. We've got 2 staff that work with the VIX predominantly, one tourism officer and an administration officer tourism still, and they coordinate with them. The part of the trick is their budgets are up this year on their accepted budget or their adopted budgets because they've been actually selling more merchandise and product that comes through. So some of the costs that we need to look at going forward with them is freight. That sneaks up on you, believe it or not, as far as, because we're dealing with such low numbers really in the grand scheme of things. Those little numbers do have impact in a percentage basis on their accounts. We did have the FAMIL booked in again this year for the volunteers, but regrettably due to that Brisbane snap lockdown, that sort of threw a right royal spanner in the works. So there isn't a huge amount to talk about with them. There is the staff. We do have brochures, and so we're pulling that out of, not necessarily out of the VIC budgets, but we do have one of the costs that's still to come out this year for us is the regional touring map will be done again, but that'll be done, Tracy, hit me if I'm wrong, before 30 June. Yeah, so the regional touring map, and so that's not a, when I say it's not a cheap exercise, people often look at, and it is an opportunity. So the regional touring map will cost us probably about 14K by the time it's finished. We're also looking at next year as part of the process of coming back to council. We do need a refresh of some of the brochures, and so that'll be a $10,000 spend for region-specific marketing material. Staff amenities catering, you had a general manager Jarvis and I had, whilst it was one of the not necessarily the VIX, but we do a little bit in the we do a little bit, but we do supply some of the milk, tea, sugar, coffee, those sorts of things for the volunteers. So it's that sort of consumable spend, for want of a better word, that we tend to find a bit in there. And I'm just looking at Coordinator Tracy in case I've missed any other practicalities. That's pretty much, yeah, brochures, I mean, transport, freight, that day-to-day operation of them, with properties picking up the power, cleaning and those sort of costs.
And Mr. CEO, the 10,000 for the brochures we're going to need, the regional marketing tourism brochures that go on the VIX, I think you said that's already over there inside your that regional development budget. Yeah. Is that where that is? Yeah. So,
oh, there we go. Just keep pressing until something happens. The money for this year is not necessarily in the regional. It'll be in one of the tourism marketing lines. Next year, it's something we would like to discuss with council. We will need to do a refresh, so where we take that 10 out of. We do, like a lot of our management, we will play unders and overs across the accounts if we can save money somewhere and offset, so we look at the bottom line as far as all those costs, so that we don't go over. We absolutely don't go over on the bottom line. But also we've been trying, we again, like the whole organisation, look at every opportunity. If we don't have to spend it, we won't.
thanks, Mr. CEO. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, just curious. I noticed that there's a line item for donations from Wandai Museum, but I noticed there's none from Kingaroy Museum, and I know they do have a donations tin, which is then, so sorry.
That's an excellent question, Councillor. Yeah, the staff, so the donations and where they're and how they're tracked. They're wonderful people that do give a little bit every so often when they go in, and then that money is reinvested back into items that the museum may need. It's one of the things actually that's been over the last 12 months, without going too far off track, given conscious of time, is that the consolidation of some of the systems. We found that this last year, and Council deliberately decided last year to take this year as a bit of a breather and consolidate some of the systems. And I'll use the inductions as part of. There was an independent system developed for induction for the VIX outside the corporate system, and so we've been able to fold all those. Still work to do in this space, but start to fold all those systems together. Donations is one of those things where the money hasn't been lost; it's been accounted. It's gone into a consolidated account, and there's been great vigour and discussion about identifying that money and pulling it out so that the volunteers are able to see where it's gone and we can keep track of it, which is well on the way. Not, again, totally emphasising not that it was lost. If, for example, the two art galleries have had a meeting yesterday with one of the galleries and ensuring that those systems are common between the two galleries for services provided. And that goes across all the VICs as well.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Thanks, Mr. CEO. Councillor Duff, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to find out about the BIEDO membership. So that's different to the 60,000. So
Correct. We will still, well, unless council tells us otherwise, but we will still be a member of BIEDO and we have a membership fee that we pay. Yep.
Yes. So I'm concerned that if we don't put any money towards BIEDO, I did flag the fact that that Alan Bream has got a project that he's relying on BIEDO and that adverse event plan to do it through BIEDO and use their software and have someone to continually update the software when the farmers feed the information in, and it's to do with the database is collected, it's to do with the ag network that we were rolling out. So that would be left if we just had the membership. We wouldn't be able to pick up on any of that stuff.
I'll go first, and if others want to disagree, but what I'm hearing is what council's saying is we've got BIEDO still to present its final quarter partnership agreement, and council's in a position to renegotiate the partnership agreement next year. So that what that looks like has yet to be decided. So it might be grant services, it might be just because something was in an agreement last year doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in the agreement this year. What I'm hearing, and I'm happy to be corrected, very happy to be corrected, is council's just reserving its right to end in those discussions and negotiations and find what's the best fit for it going forward. Now, very, very happy to, if I've heard that wrong, so be corrected, Mayor.
Can I just clarify? I think confirm exactly. My understanding is that the appetite of the committee at this stage has been to, exactly as our Mayor's CEO has said, is that council would reserve the right and the flexibility to be able to have those discussions. So while we might allocate a broad amount of money here, we talked about that 130,000 for each development, how council allocates that is a matter still to be determined once we've had those further conversations. So Councillor Duff, there will be the opportunity then to consider whether council wants to look at funding or how we would actually structure and fund that ongoing body of work if council considers that to be a priority and is prepared to support that.
Thank you. I just have a couple more questions. So that I noticed that the sport and rec, there's 20,000 to go into that. Is that correct? Sport and rec, and then you've got 5 for Indigenous Affairs and 5 for rural resilience.
Where are we on that budget, Mr. Councillor Duff? What page, sorry?
Are you in mine?
What's the account number?
That'd be General Manager O'May, I'm pleased to say.
I think you've got the wrong sets of documents there, Councillor Duff.
No, that's all right. So that one will be up next week.
No, that's fine.
It's lovely to give the heads up to General Manager O'May to make sure he looks at those points for you.
Yeah, okay. I was just making sure of the rural resilience stuff, and yeah.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Look, just Mr. CEO, if I could just go to the fourth last page, committee. And it's an account called area, sorry, I've just got to get myself on the right page. It's an account area called Council's Expenses, 1161 is the group. Yep, got that one. So if we roll down there, we see council's remuneration. Last year's budget was 559. This year we've spent that, and we've spent, this current year's budget's 559. No, sorry, the current year's budget's 570. Righto. So the current year budget is 570, and we haven't increased that. So I'm certainly going to give a heads up again that I'd be certainly, putting to council to seriously consider that we don't take a pay rise, as will be offered in July this year. That'll be a matter for council. But if that's the case, then that 570 would remain as is, would it not? Assuming with the superannuation. Moving down then to councillors' accommodation, yeah, that's fine, that stays the same. So no increase to councillors' accommodation, on top of no increase to councillors' wages. Councillors' meals and incidentals, no increases there. So those rates would stay as they were last year. That's the assumption we're making here. The 5,000 for hospitality expenses, I'd like to suggest that we take that out and that we reallocate that, remove it, or we reallocate it to something that is more valuable to the organisation. I get a $2,000 allocation for hospitality expenses as the mayor. Quite frankly, after 14 months in the job, I don't think I need it. And I'm happy to give that money back to go into something more important, if other councillors are prepared to support that. And councillors' vehicle and fuel expenses, we've got 55 in the budget this year. We're tracking at 46. Got that at 55 again, so no increase, but I'm actually going to put forward as part of the policy and procedure review that we consider capping that at 10,000 kilometres per councillor. Of course, I don't claim anything as the mayor, so that would leave 6 lots of 7,100, which would be $42,600, which would save $13,000 in the budget that could be reallocated. But again, that would be a matter for council. But I'm just giving a heads up today that that's some of what I'd like to bring forward when it's appropriate to consider those. So when we look at our council's reimbursed expenses policy for review, just a heads up to the committee that that's what I'd be looking to bring forward, is that we put a cap on the kilometres back to 10,000 kilometres per councillor, which at 71 cents a kilometre would then max it out at 7,100 per annum per councillor. Now again, not wanting to leave anyone short in the pocket, but again, as I said the other day, it's a symbolic, I suppose, initiative of this council to say that, you know, as the apex of the organisation, we will show leadership and demonstrate that we are also ourselves prepared to find savings in terms of what we cost the organisation. So it's symbolic, but it's also real in terms of saving money. So look, that's just to flag that. Whether you wanted to leave that as is at this stage, probably I'd be suggesting, but just to flag to the accounting staff that may come through. It may well even just come through as a first quarter adjustment, a budget revision, but also to let councillors know that I would be putting that forward for council's, I suppose, consideration. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm supportive of the cap, definitely, and I haven't claimed a single kilometre of travel, so I'm not really worried about that either. So, you know, I understand. I think, you know, we signed up for the job. Certainly, yeah, I've just never felt clear enough in that policy to actually claim it, so I've never claimed a kilometre of travel. And I just wanted to notice with meals and incidentals, it says year to date for councillors, it says 0, and then we've got a proposed budget of $3,909. So we've spent nothing to date in that line item, and I just wanted to check, what is that amount there? Do we need that?
I'll yield to Grant, but I think that's been consolidated across a couple of different areas. I'll double check for that for you, Councillor, and come back. But there's been, if you look at the whole budget versus the proposed, so there's been no change in the full allocation across the councillor's budget. So it's been absorbed. But Maxine, unless you, I think, anyway, yeah, we'll double check, but I think that's been absorbed across a couple of different ones that have gone to zero by the
Yeah,
looks
I'd
of
have
it.
to double check
Yeah,
that one.
but we'll double check for you.
That could be meals when you're traveling, is what it sounds like to me, but I can definitely check what that
Yep.
budget was made of.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just interesting there for the benefit of the committee and, of course, the community, if anyone that's tuned into this budget committee meeting, that council allocated $7,998 for accommodation, of which the councillors have only spent $885, $3,909 for meals and incidentals, and there's pretty well none or very little expense there that might have been consolidated somewhere else, and $5,000 for hospitality expenses, and we only spent $115. So, you know, that goes to show that councillors certainly have been running on a lean budget in terms of accommodation, meals, and hospitality over the last 12 months, which is excellent. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
It's some of those ones that, like, we'll hit them now with some of the LJQ Alga ones, because those accommodation, that's where we've know the practical reality of capital cities are always way more expensive. But no, council has showed extreme restraint over the last period of time, and that's, yeah, we'll double check those. But I think that what we're looking at is apples and lemons, that there's other accounts have been consolidated back into them. So it's not just what the councillor claimed. There'll be other expenses when we make a corporate booking for an event or something, that they've been folded into it, would be my thought.
Okay, Councillor Duff, your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag that I support the mayor in the remuneration, like not taking any pay rise. Also support the hospitality one. I think we've already demonstrated that we're not using it like it's hardly been used at all. So I'm absolutely keen to support that, and also the mileage one. I've actually decided that I'm not going to claim anything for mileage. I mean, I travel 120 kilometres in and out just to these meetings, and I was uncomfortable with the change to where we claimed our mileage. I felt that I could break council if I just kept going the way I was. So I just decided to, since Christmas, I haven't claimed a cent, and I'm on the same page now as the mayor and Councillor Shoemaker. I'm not going to claim into the future, just flagging that, because I think that we need to make some cuts, and I'm prepared to do that job, and travel in and out on just my own money, because I just think that we do it for community, and we get a lot of beltings for seeing it. I've heard sayings like we've got a trough in the nose and the trough, and the snout and the trough, and all this kind of stuff. And I wanted to declare and show to the community that I'm not in it for the money, and that I just do it because I love the community. And I think that, and as the mayor said, also this is a tight budget. We need to walk the talk, as far as if we want everybody to pull tight and work together and make savings, that we need to be able to demonstrate that. So just wanted to flag that.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. And just before I go back to Councillor Shoemaker, just really in summary here, what we're saying is the CEO is saying is pretty well going to come in on budget for exec services for this current financial year. So congratulations, Mr. CEO, and to your team for coming in under budget. That seems to be where you're tracking, which is a great effort, great work to see that you've been able to do that. And of course, on top of that, for this next year, I'm not looking for any real increase. So it's pretty well the status quo for exec services. And considering they've been running fairly lean for some time, I'd like to congratulate you and your team for the contribution you're making to keeping our organisation, your part of the organisation, run very efficiently and contributing to helping council's financial position. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. CEO. And I suppose, now over to you, Councillor Shoemaker, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I do agree. I've been through the budget line for line. I have highlighted a few items. There is a $160,000 variance there across the board. So, CEO Mark, we've put every general manager in the squeeze, and really I just want to hear from you, is there any opportunity with any of these line items to shave anything more? I've noticed there's a staff recruitment cost budget, 60035, and this year to date we've only spent 41,000, and we're proposing a budget of 80. There's also, the staff training budget. This year we've spent 149, and we're proposing a budget of 195. And there was also professional memberships contract only. We've only spent 5,300. There's a budget of 9,000. Consultants, we've shaved that. We've only spent 2,000. No, that's general operations. Contractors is gone. Consultants is gone. Yeah, just some of these internal
just-
plant charges from 55,000 this year to date spend, proposing 80,000 this financial year. Like, are there any opportunities in any of
Okay.
these sorts of line items?
Plant we may have missed because we missed it in, and I got the ladies very kindly to pull it down because we actually jettisoned most of the vehicles out of this section last year. So when the first run of the exec budget came through, there was 20 we took straight out of that for this version. So I'll have a look at plant because that one just could be a general oversight because that would have been based
This is
on.
the plan in PNC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't be that lot left. Anyway, we'll have a look, councillor, because we had car in. Yeah, we got, anyway, without using names, we'd lost one car definitely out of PNC this last 12 months. Generally, in most of these things, professional development, it's like a lot of things, staff choose not to claim. And some of this is, so the budgets are built for, how do I put this? The budgets are built for what we would expect would be normally claimed, but a lot of people make the personal decision. Now, I know councillors talk about meals, and this is without sounding like we're angelic. Occasionally, if you're somewhere in a meeting and the meal is part of it or something like that, yes, that's fine. General Manager Jarvis and I went across for the regional planning meeting yesterday and we bought lunch. I can speak fairly comfortably, if not all, but certainly the majority of the senior staff. I can't remember seeing a meal claim coming through like my time here. Now, they're quite legitimate. Now, if people go away to a conference or training, and that's fair cop, it's part of the, and they get a meal allowance. And so, yeah, there is some claimed, absolutely, and quite rightly so. And not everyone's, and also the balance is it's not people who do claim should feel bad about it because it's not everyone's in that same position. But we've got, and I always don't miss the opportunity to give the staff a plug, we've got really good people and a lot of them choose not to. And it is just that simple, they choose not to. Now, again, there'll be little bits in there. The training, we as we're coming out of the COVID, certainly affected our training over the last 2 financial years. So I'd probably be hesitant to give up on the training budget. Councillors Duff, music to your ears. I hope we're looking at, we've got, and it'll be without stealing the Mayor's thunder for the for the next week's standing committee. We've got students in work placement as an interim step, which is where we are. And we're looking at next year's budget for the, there will need to be a little bit of a budget for the school-based traineeships and things like that. So whilst we're not there, that work's progressing, and so there'll be an update on it in the Mayor's next week. We got a lovely letter back from TAFE about what they're going to not do and everything else. So haven't fully digested that, but we've certainly signalled to TAFE that we're looking for and they've said that there's going to be no reduction in service, which is great. So that'll be its own story in its own right. So again, without getting too far off the track, most of those things, plant definitely we can have a bit of a look at and see where that falls. There might be 20 grand in there that could come out for that one vehicle. It's the one that immediately springs to mind because I know we missed it in Exec 2 from what used to be to where we are now. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Shoemaker, Mr. CEO. Okay, continue to just look through that, councillors. Time just to work through it. Put forward any other questions at this stage? While councillors are doing that, Mr. CEO, just in terms of an outcome from on item 6.1, I'm feeling as though we're getting very close to a recommendation up to council on this. I can't see there's going to be any significant changes here. Is that something that we're able to determine today?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. If everyone's comfortable today, all we're asking, all I'm asking is that this will be just folded into the overall budget. So there will be still opportunity as part of the whole budget, and you'll be able to see it as it's a piece of a puzzle. Is just that this council notes the report and for inclusion into the 21-22 budget. Or draft budget, sorry. Yeah, it should be draft
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah, this certainly doesn't have the complexities around rating models and movement of expenses. This department doesn't have that others have. So it's an easier one to tick off and box away if the committee is prepared to go down that path. Unless there's any other questions, I'd be looking to put forward a motion that council notes the report for inclusion in the draft 2021/2021 budget. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Duff, thank you. Now, Councillor's question, importantly, before we put that to the vote, please take your time. Any questions? Anyone wish to speak for or against? Yeah, Councillor Schumacher, please proceed.
My apologies. I just cannot sign off on this without going through it thoroughly. General operations for exec. There's a line item there for 40,800, and we've only expended 24,200 this year to date. It's checking what is general operations.
Max, are you able to just highlight us on what would be coded to that? Do we know it's noted it's a coding issue?
63551.
That can be a range of things. I'd have to come back and say exactly what that 24,000 relates to. I haven't had a detailed look into that one, sorry, but I can certainly come back and see what that 40,800 budget is made up of.
Yeah, maybe, Mr. CEO, that might be a line item that could be looked at. We're just going to have to find savings across the board, so I know we're getting into rats and mice, but as you have continuously said, if you watch the cents, the dollars add up. So, some of these things, I'm sorry to be so painful, but, some of these line items, I just wonder if there is an opportunity to shave anything back.
First of all, can I say, Councillor Schumacher, you're not painful, and please don't apologise. I think what you're doing is exactly what we need to do. It's congratulate you on being so thorough and working through it. I'm sure our CEO appreciates that as well as part of a really good, thorough, robust process. So no, it's very much welcomed. And look, I'm happy to sort of look at that motion in terms of perhaps changing that council notes the report for inclusion, that notes the report and perhaps seeks clarification prior to inclusion on some line items prior to inclusion. Would you like to perhaps we'll just temper that back a little bit at this stage, Mr. CEO, without disrupting our process too much?
The only thing, Mr. Mayor, is totally, and yeah, no, pennies and pounds, absolutely agree, and it's a good old saying, that one, cents and dollars, pennies and pounds. The exec services budget and economic development budget last year took a massive hit, so we're actually under where we were a couple of years ago. The only word of caution I would give is that we will actually start to run the department to the point where it can't operate. And that's not without being dramatic, but I mean, we're talking about very small numbers, but yeah, certainly we can have a look at them. But we've pulled back in a whole range of areas deliberately to try and make sure we were given that budget last year and vigorously have tried to have kept to it. I'm a bit like Max. Certainly, any of those numbers, council would happy to, and we'll pull them through because, just making sure that there's not anything outstanding like the ID subscription or something like that that's yet to come through, and have a look and feedback. As I said, this will just now be dropped into the final draft budget. So certainly, plenty of opportunities once we've got that list of which ones you want to have a look at. We can go from there. Yep.
So, Mr. CEO, once we get the draft budget then put together, there'll be a good opportunity for councillors to go back through this, seek more information and question some of those line items again. This won't just go straight to the 30 June adoption.
If you want to say no, no,
You just said no.
absolutely not. Yeah, no, it did to be at the very minimal. I would like to, at the very minimal, where you will have you'll have a variations now on the draft budget, draft operational budget as we go through. But the final draft, if I can call it that, will be 2 weeks prior to the budget meeting, so people can go through it line by line, highlight, right on, that sort of, yeah, absolutely.
Will there be an opportunity in a forum such as this, a budget committee, I know, to be able, can we actually establish a forum such as this, another budget committee meeting, specially set aside to review the final draft? Is that something we can do?
That's in council's hand. I mean, we were going to run, and when we passed the resolution, I put a timeline on to the 30th of June, so to give it a life. So I've pretty much got in my own head working forward that we'll use every Wednesday between now and 30 June. So yeah, certainly if that's the case, yeah.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. So there'll be opportunity to have a budget committee meeting where we consider the holistic budget as a draft document, and we can come back and visit some of these items if we want to move allocations around or take allocations out. It's going to be important to get that in the context of the whole budget, I think, isn't it, as to where we land with our deficit, pull the bits together, see the full puzzle, and then start to work on the elements through that draft process. Probably just keen to hear from you, Councillor Shoemaker, how you're feeling about that as a process.
Yeah, look, I agree, Mr. Mayor. Like, we've spent the last couple of months working through service levels and operational budgets. For me, personally, I will be leaning in on all operational budgets because the reality of the matter is we are running a deficit. I do not want to see us in a couple of years' time in the same position North Burnett is in. I know we're far from that at this point, but some of these costs, while they're nice to have, we simply can't afford them. So I, would do the same in my own business, my own home budget. Sometimes we have to make the tough call. Certainly it's great to hear that some of the rats and mice and some of those old subscriptions and things that aren't giving council value are being tidied up and looked at. And I guess that's what I hope to achieve through this challenging process, that we are really looking at these numbers, because at the end of the day, every single dollar counts. These are the dollars of our ratepayers. So I agree, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to do this work, and I can see how, I can see it's $138,000 variation, $160,000 variation, and I can see, how hard the team has worked to stay to their current budget. I don't want to be in a position where, we're just going through line items, red penning things simply because we need to knock down that deficit. So I will consistently be challenging these line items, particularly around what the spend is and what we're allocating next year, because every single department, if every single department has just a couple of extra little things in here, it adds up across the board. And certainly if we have to sit down and start just hacking things out, that is going to impact service delivery. If we can do it in a gradual way where we're just shaving a few dollars here and there, I think that would be a much better approach for our council at this point in time. So I've seen all the service delivery information, seen what every department does. I know you're all doing the very best that you can. Unfortunately, this I'm used to a culture where this is the norm, and I won't be happy until every stone has been unturned and every dollar has been challenged.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. I would certainly commend your statements to the council. I think what you're suggesting as a process is certainly no more and no less than what the Local Government Act requires of you, it requires of all of us as councillors. It talks about, one of the local government key principles talk about financial decision-making, financial sustainability. And we've got a legal and ethical responsibility to make sure that we are doing exactly what Councillor Shoemaker's articulating. So I'd certainly commend and applaud you for that. I think that's exactly the process we need to follow, and continue to work with the team on getting the best outcome we can, the best value for money for our ratepayers. Yeah. So that being the case, and I guess, Mr. CEO, before I come to you, Councillor Potter, sorry, is just if we can get, I guess if we can progress the process sufficiently well, we can get to the point where we can get a draft budget out, if we can give Selena time to get us a draft budget with enough time to go through it and maybe start to have some of those questions answered before we actually come into that budget committee 2 weeks before adoption. And if that means we've got to get general ledger detail reports off the finance team, GM, or whatever we've got to get, if we can get that information, get some clarification, come back to the budget committee with a better understanding of actually what details in here before we actually get a draft budget recommended up to the special meeting on 30 June. So there's a lot more work to do around that. But I'd recommend to councillors that if you do have things, go through, highlight them, and go back to the departments or through our finance team and request that information to get that clarity before we get to that mid-June draft budget discussion. Yeah. So if you're comfortable with that, Councillor Shoemaker, as a process, yeah. Sorry, and just Selena quickly, and then we'll come back to Councillor Potter.
I have that information on general operations if you want me to give it to you now.
Oh yes, please share. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I've just been through the ledger. I'm only picking out the big ones here. So there's 11,344 for Blackadder. Yep. So there's roughly 4.5 grand for the Rainmaker. And then there's something in here for Australia Day. Australia Day, there's 3,900, so say 4,000 for Australia Day. And you've got Anzac Day of 2,282. That will be close to what you're looking at for your 24.
Thank you. So it probably just leads me to the question of what's the additional $20,000 for? Because if we're not doing the corporate plan, we won't be needing that 11,000 for Blackadder. I know council has resolved to use some of Rainmaker's services, so I can see us putting a provision there should we need that in the next year. And Anzac Day and Australia Day are general civil ceremonies. I'd probably rather see them come out on one line so it's clear what that money's for. Was there additional work that you were thinking of doing with 20,000?
A multitude of strategies coming over this next 12 months. So, and that's how I say, we'll come back. Any of those lists of numbers will come back for you as far as part of the feedback from this process, because some of them will need, like whether it's external consultation as we move into different strategies across the department. But yeah, no, happy to come back.
Yeah, I just think so we can get councillors satisfied as to around some of these numbers, Mr. CEO. I know we've got an RFI process, which is a 10-day turnaround. Is there any way in which we can give councillors the opportunity to ask questions on these line items before we get to that draft meeting? Otherwise, I can see a lot of RFI is going to be coming into the system because you can't always just have the information here in these budget committee meetings. Sometimes you've got to go away, get the reports, take them away, look at the detail and digest it, and then give some thought to that. Maybe have a conversation with the general manager or the CEO about that before you come back to the draft meeting. Is that something you'd like to see as a process, Councillor Shoemaker, if it's possible?
Mr. Mayor,
CEO?
if I can, before and Councillor, if you look at, and again, I'll go back to, I suppose my overall point is, and certainly, yeah, we can have a look. If next year we only need 20 out instead of 40 in that number, we can use 2040. If you go back to the first quarter review of the budget this year, we actually break even on that first quarter review, pretty close to it. So there is not a lot in there as far. Anyway, for 20,000, it's kind of not worth. I don't want to sound rude, but it's kind of not worth the time to debate it. We can drop it out and then pick it up if we go down the track. But yeah, there isn't a lot in there. So. Certainly the plant in PNC, absolutely. Have a look at that. That's probably a couple. If we can pull another couple of, if we can pull another 20, 50 or 40, 50 out of the different numbers, well, that would be, I would be really reluctant to go much more because I just don't, with sometimes the feedback we get on catering and different things like that, we just are getting down into that level of some of these areas.
Mr. CEO, could I just suggest that with that motion there that I've got there. The council notes the report and refers it to the CEO for the identification of prospective cost savings. I can see the prospective cost savings prior to inclusion in the draft 21-22 budget. Yeah, because it seems though, Mark, you probably know what to look at, and Councillor Shoemaker can engage with you on that outside of this room if you're happy for you guys to sit down and look through that, or any other councillor for that matter. Oh, sorry.
Again, no, that's right. As I say, feedback from any councillor is more than welcoming. Certainly, Councillor Shoemaker. We had our little monthly get together on Monday, and I think did we give you a set early on Monday? No, at the workshop, everyone got them on Monday. Yeah, so any of those lines, anything that's identified, give us a hoy, and we're happy to chat through them. We'll have a look at them.
So, councillors, that motion then gives you the opportunity to come back to the CEO with this document between now and mid-April, when the draft budget comes to council budget committee, and ask any questions on the line items and have that conversation around any adjustments that you think might be opportunistic for finding some savings. So, okay, Councillor Potter, you've been waiting for quite some time. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just curious, Binduma Homestead Facilities 1066 is actually in this, and I understand the VIX is under your section as well, but I'm just curious as to why this is in exec services when Ringsfield House isn't, and yet to me it's very much the same type of thing. And also on line item 63551, the general operation, the general operations there, it said we've actually spent nothing this year to date. Last financial year, we spent 5,900. But it's actually 15,000 we've got put aside for that one as well.
I would be loving to give Bundumba over to where Ringsfield is. This is what you're seeing as a consolidation of both the ED budgets, ED tourism budgets, and its responsibilities in exec. So this is my earlier point. Last year, across all those budgets, there was particularly there was extensive cost saving came out of last year's budget process. So what you're seeing is all those elements now being consolidated back into one. The Binduma I can't speak with any confidence on because I've just not, and it's a fair point, Councillor. It probably should sit with Ringsfield, but because of the way ED was running at the time, it had certain functions that fell in under it rather than others, and so like the galleries, and that's one of the ones as we go forward is certainly having a conversation. I'd probably leave it to that first quarter because this is part of the services that are delivered in each of the sections, and there's some anomalies in there as far as aligning some of those services. And yeah, Binduma and the heritage stuff should probably all sit, and Ringsfield should sit together.
Just further to what Councillor Potter's asking you about, it's a good point, Councillor Potter, because we're proposing a budget in the 21-22 budget of $47,910 for Binduma Homestead, but the year-to-date actuals for Binduma is only $7,774. So probably just want to understand, where is that $47,000? Who's proposed that? Where's that going? If we've only spent 7,000, I probably don't understand the need for the extra 40 odd. And you can see that the year before it was 31,000. So clearly those costs have shifted to another department somewhere.
No,
Yeah,
there's
probably just keen for some more info on that, Selena, if that's possible.
Hey, Tina, I might just get you to pop your light off if you don't mind. We
Sorry.
might go to Selena just to clarify. Thank you.
So the notes in the budget pack is that there's $15,000 for the caretaker contribution from council, and there's also $30,000 put in for the consultant to prepare heritage permit for restoration. Consultants to prepare construction drawings for new entrance sign, restoration works. So that's the increase.
That's going to be part of your heritage maintenance, and a lot of these heritage facilities are going to need their own discussion as this next year, because there are costs of. I think it might have been even this morning as part before I stepped out, is that there's probably not been the investment that's needed in them, and it's going to catch up with us soon. So that heritage permits we're not able to do, as we've found before with different things, we're not able to do much on these sites until you get that paperwork sorted out. So as I said, I actually agree fully in my own mind that heritage should sit somewhere where it can get that efficiency and consolidation of different functions. Because if I had to put my hand on my heart and say that I oversee that budget, I really don't. It sits more with property at the moment. So my thought would be, and would be my suggestion to council, is we leave it alone until that first quarter, and then when we do that service delivery of which department delivers which services, it gets consolidated, and we have a look at it as part of that first quarter review for savings or extra expenditure.
Just go to Councillor Duff. Now you've been waiting for some time.
Yeah, I just want to say that in terms of process, and the councillors from other from last term would know that the process that we used to is we used to have all of the line items up on the computer, and then there was drop boxes, and you could look in behind and see quickly what was, like the questions that Councillor Shoemaker's asking. We could just get it straight away by going down onto the Dropbox, and I'm just wondering, because we're very used to going through these operational budgets line by line, but just wondering why we've changed to the paper version rather than doing more on. I'm happy with the paper, but why we aren't utilising that particularly as we've got such a U-Butte system now. Why we aren't using more online sort of
Councillor
budgeting
Duff.
process.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just interject. How long are you going back now? It could well have been a manual spreadsheet system that had a data dump that you could drop down boxes off cells on. Yeah.
Not for 3 years. Yeah. So and I'm looking at the two ladies over there.
It was before me.
Yeah. So it would be probably directly out of. Well, I would imagine Gary was also corporate services. Would have probably been a direct. You're exactly right, Mayor. It would have been something Gary built.
We do have,
yeah.
there is a comment section in our budget packs, which is where Celine is pulling these comments from. So if we're interested, if it is something that the council is interested in, I could work with Business Systems to try and be able to pull a field where those comments can actually come into these reports. So you'd actually have this report with the comments that the managers put into that field. So certainly something that we can work on.
It's a really good point, Councillor Duff, and it's something obviously, as Max is saying, we can work on as a work in progress. Take that on board to further develop and design the system, so we can get that drill down capacity moving forward. Yeah.
Through you, Mr.
Manager
Mayor, I
Jarvis,
think
yeah.
that the system you're probably referring to, Councillor, was PCS. It had the capacity to do that. That was the program before you got Tech One. It did have the capacity to do that.
You're probably going back 8 or 9 years there, Councillor Duff. You're going back, oh gee, Adam was a boy. Right, okay,
No,
Councillor Potter? Yeah.
Actually, I was just agreeing with Councillor Duff because they used to put it up on the screen, and it was actually the drop down box you're talking about that Celine is looking in. That's what you were talking about, because I remember seeing that up on the screen a couple of times. Yes.
So we can put, so I'm looking directly in Tech One now. We can open the budget packs up and have it on the screen, and then you can see all the managers' comments as you go down. There's no
Well, there you
reason
go.
why
We've
we
got
couldn't
that
do
capacity if
Yeah,
you choose to do that.
It's all live, and that gives the ability to drill down into actuals as well. So you'd have the ability to drill down into actuals and see any comments that the managers have made. So that's all live within Tech One if we wanted to just have that up.
Well, there you go. We've got the capacity to do it. So that's something we can look at in terms of future committee meetings. Let's keep, thanks, Mr. CEO. Let's keep moving. I've got the motion there. It's seconded by Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff, are you happy with those slight changes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Refer it back to the CEO for consideration of prospective cost savings. Councillors, please work with the CEO on that. Put that to the vote now. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Excellent. Okay, now we'll move on to the next item, which is 6.2, the Waste Services Operational Budget 21-22 at page 13. And now invite Manager Patch to come up to one of the microphones and work through this with the committee. Thank you. So what we might do here, General Manager May, is and hand over to yourself and Manager Patch to talk us through. Perhaps if we could start with could I recommend the OPEX expenditure items line by line. Having done that, we can then come back to some of the modelling, some of the waste rating modelling. So if we can perhaps work from our bottom-up strategy. Let's go to our expenses first, and then we can come back and look at our revenue rating after that. So if we can start to now go to the Statement of Comprehensive Income and look at that expenditure, the expenses section, recurrent expenses on the bottom of the page, and we'll get you to talk us through that. Thanks, Manager Patch.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a recap of the income statement that we discussed on Monday. And we have removed the $232,000 in the plant out of the materials and services line. And that was for the extra truck and trailer. I've also removed it was 71,000. I went back and double checked the numbers for the one FTE. So there's about $71,000 removed out of the employee benefits line. And we've added in the $100,000 for dividends. So if you want a line-by-line breakdown of the revenue and expenditure, the same as the others, I can produce that and I can email that out. And you guys can,
yeah, that's excellent. Thanks very much. Okay, so what we've got there now is we've pulled out the additional truck and trailer that's come out of internal plant charges. The extra full-time truck driver, 71,000, has been pulled out and set aside for at least 12 months until we reconsider that. And so that's pulled out, Council, $303,000 and added back $100,000 for a possible dividend for Council's consideration. And that gets us cash positive for the 10 years and enables us and is funding principal loan repayments depending on what we adopt in the revenue model. So just in terms of those expenses there, Council, in the green column, committee, sorry, does anyone have any questions on any of those line items that you'd like to drill down on?
Well, probably just Mr. Mayor, the same question been asking every Manager Craig, have you and your team identified any cost savings that you've applied to this budget before us here?
Particularly with waste services, we've got this pretty much. We have our staff, the trucks, and the waste facilities that we manage. To minimise the cost, we either reduce trucks, reduce staff, or reduce the waste facilities. So as far as being able to come before you and present some potential cost savings without eliminating from those particular areas, there's not overly a great deal of area that we can play in, unfortunately.
Now, Manager, the major one to look at there is materials and services, 4,000, just over $4 million. Is it 4,372? 4.3 million? 4.8, sorry, I'm going to have to go and see APSM. 4.8 million. That being the case, just further to Council Shoemaker's questions, first, two questions. First of all, are there any costs built into that, any budget built into that, to service the proposed new transfer station at Maidenwell, or is that just based on what we're doing at Maidenwell right now? And the second question is there any other prospective opportunities for council to find some efficiencies or reprogram to reduce that materials and services?
So in response to that particular question, Mr. Mayor, what is presently in there is the costs associated for Maidenwell is what our contractor costs are. The difference between the contractors and what it will cost council to service it if we go through to building the transfer station, it will be in the same ballpark. So what we will stop paying in the contractors, council would pick that up as a fixed cost with its staff, its truck to pick up those bins. So it's not going to be necessarily more money or less money. It's potentially operationally a cost neutral exercise, but from a capital expenditure point of view, yeah, you're looking at that 350,000 presently.
Yes, thanks, Manager. So there's no extra costs in there for Maidenwell Station. Is there anything that you could, again, Councillor Shoemaker's point, that you could perhaps identify that council could investigate further to identify ways that we could perhaps work differently to find some savings that you've explored, or you could perhaps think of to put to this committee at this stage?
Without trying to sound cliche, we do review that as we go throughout the year. Like if we can get some synergies, or we can introduce some recycling options to council at no cost. Like most recently, we've been able to introduce recycling of e-waste. Thank you, e-waste. I knew it was one of those vowels, by a vowel. So e-waste, that's come online at no cost to council. So we're looking at those innovative ways or additional things we can be doing throughout the year. It's not just we wait for budget to come around and then go and then present it before council. If it's a good idea at the time, we bring that before you then and there to try and introduce it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Manager. Selena, as the accountant, can you tell us what the year-to-date expenditure is from your system there on materials and services, on that material services line in comparison to that 4.8 million? How are we tracking this year? If there's an assumption that the service doesn't change for this next 12 months, and just let us know to what date that is that year-to-date figure at?
Yeah, I can do that. It'll just take me a second to
Yeah,
run the report.
If you can just do that in the background, thank you.
The other point that I was going to let you know too is the major changes in that income statement. So from the prior year budget, you've had a rounded $373,000 increase in admin recoupments. So that's hitting that materials and services line. There's 15,000 extra in services, and that looks like it's due 6,000 black butt due to supervision and push up of contract adjustment, cardboard bin hires and collection, plus extra dollars required for cleaning up illegal dumping and gate repairs at Proston. There's also they're the biggest ones. Oh, and then you've got 42,500 in materials for the extra $5 per tonne for the waste levy, just as an overview for it all. And then I'll run your ledger for you.
If you could, thank you. Manager, just also to confirm, there are no additional in that 704,000 for your employee benefits. For anyone watching, that means staff wages and on costs. Is there any additional staff in there, or is that simply the two questions? One, are there any additional staff? And two, does that include funding any current vacancies?
So to answer the first question, Mr. Mayor, that I believe does not include the additional position that was being discussed previously for the third truck. So that's now been removed. So that amount there for wages is what is the current wages bill, so to speak. That includes the EBA increase. So there's no additional positions in that, and we currently have in waste services all of those positions are filled. That we're not carrying any vacancies.
Yeah, thanks very much, Craig. The finance costs will be 517,000, the interest on the borrowings. And I see over the page, just while Selena's running that report, we can see over the page, which is the statement of cash flows, that the borrowings, repayment of borrowings is, I think it says
73,262.
262. So
And-
I'm going to have to get a magnifying glass, stronger glasses, but 73,262. So that's the principal
That's the principal.
component.
Yep. So
Yep.
the interest that you're referring to on the finance cost is actually, the big portion there is actually the unwinding of the discount for the provision.
Oh, yes, of
So
course. You've
that's-
explained that before,
Yep,
Selena,
and that's
isn't
the
it? Yeah.
unknown number. That's probably looking more along the worst case, but
Yes.
yeah.
So then we'd need to make sure, committee, that the NEP if we wanted to fund if we wanted Waste to cover its own loan repayments, we would have to make sure that it has at least a NEP operating surplus of that 73 odd thousand dollars to fund its borrowings, to fund its principal repayment. I just want to clarify that. Yeah. Which is, I guess that's the bottom line that we'll come to once we start to work through shortly the revenue modelling. While Sena's doing that, General Manager Jarvis, in the depreciation there, I think it says 92,000. Are there any items in there that are able to be disposed of that are now obsolete, that give rise to that 92,000 depreciation? Any capital disposals, Peter, that we could look at that might reduce the amount of depreciation at this point in time? Any obsolete assets that are, sitting at the back and not being used, or what gives us that figure?
No.
I know that's not plant, is it? Because the trucks and gear are all over in plant and fleet. But I would like a little bit more commentary around what's in that depreciation, and is there any scope to be actually write off any assets and bring that down? Just while Selena's getting that information. Thanks,
Yeah, through
Peter.
you. So this we had a good look at this with the development of the asset management plan. So this is all the bins and the infrastructure at our transfer station sites and at the weighbridge at Kingaroy. So we did have a good review of it this year. So this is actually a $23,000 decrease on last year's budget. So we actually have reduced that, given we've got a lot better handle on our assets in the waste area now. So that's actually a decrease on last year's budget. So but we are a lot more confident with the assets there through the review work that Manager Patch and the team did sort of through the asset management plan development. So yeah, we're a lot more confident with that, and it is a reduction in. But all of those are currently used assets, and unless we did close a facility, then they are all still operationally required.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That's an excellent answer. So what you're really saying is that you've been through an asset management planning process already, and over the last 12 months, you've identified $23,000 worth of depreciation savings through that process. So congratulations. That's great work. I'm going to applaud that as well. So we sometimes get criticised at the community that council and staff aren't doing enough to find savings, but that's an example of some great work. 23,000 mightn't sound a lot, but you've just cut $23,000 off the depreciation budget depreciation expense through some great asset management planning work. Thank you. And it's great to know that all the assets are being productively utilised. Everything's on that schedule, so well done. Yeah, Selena, have we got that information now on the year-to-date actuals on materials and services?
2.849 mil.
2.849 mil.
Yep.
Okay, so say 2.85. And to what date is that? So that's to today's date, mid-May, almost mid-May. Okay, so 2.84. Peter and Craig, did you want to just provide any commentary around that, or is that something we can perhaps take on notice to have a bit of a look at that? I'm just... Yeah, because it seems as though maybe we've gone a bit high on the budget, if that's the case. Just putting it out there for debate purposes, yeah.
Yes, so certainly around that, the 2.8 made up of, so 1.8 of that is probably the current JJ Richards contract. So the materials and services are made up. Let's say the budget is 2.5 in services, plant hire. Our current budget is 702 and we're at 713,000, so we are actually over budget on plant high this current year, and so that's what I think we've talked about, utilising that backup truck. So so there has been in the budget we're proposing, there is a big increase in plant hire, so that is even to cater for that, utilising that the spare truck that we have. So this has been reduced back. We did have 400,000 additional if we bought the third truck, but this is actually we've increased the plant hire budget on our current usage with our 2 current trucks and that backup truck. So that's so we're at 713,000 year to date in there. Materials, it's 270,000 in materials. I think a lot of that is in our levy returns to the state. That's running at 86%, so it's basically materials would be on budget at the moment. The services is probably something we can, like the JJ's contract and that, where the just have to be careful with it whether we've been billed. So because sometimes after the end of month, the timing of that bill takes a bit to get through. So.
And Peter, I'm just concerned that there could be a big $500,000 bill or something coming from a contractor here. But what I think it does raise is the prospect of doing some further forensic investigations on this figure. Because if we're at 2.85 now, let's assume that we haven't actually brought in the May, and well, there won't be any May in there, and there's 2 months to go. That's assuming we've got all the April accruals in? Or is that just April accruals would be in? Would April trade creditors be in, Selena, at this stage?
The 2.8's for materials and services, but the area that's got the biggest change in the budget is that you've got a 2.5 mil budget for services, but you've only spent 1.8 mil, which would be the JJ's area. So you're currently running over budget to original budget. You're currently running over budget on plant, over budget on materials slightly, but your services has a big, it's what, 700,000 there in services. That is difference that so you're under budget by about 700,000 in services. So you have to look at when those costs were coming in. And also the other thing between that and your 4.8 mil is, don't forget you've got another $370-something thousand that's been put on top of that for your admin recoupments, which wouldn't be reflected in here. So you'd have to take the 373 off the 4.8 to start with. So you're comparing sort of apples with apples. Plus those extra bits you'd want to come back to, yeah. Yep.
So, Selena, the 4.87, we've got to drop 370 off that. So that brings it back to 4.5, really. If you're comparing this year to last year, it's 2.85 to 4.5, not 4.87. But there's still a gap there of 1.7, and you're explaining it. I mean, we might spend all that between now and 30 June. There could be good reasons, or we'll have extra cost next year, as you've just highlighted, Peter. I would like to see perhaps that we do some more forensics around this to have a good look into where do we think we're going to land 30 June and how will that change next year. I don't want to see us over-allocate in that particular account. Well, I would prefer that we didn't allocate if we can do that. So if it's possible to come back with a further report on that one line item,
And
if we can do some more work on that, Craig, with Selena if possible, we'd
so
be
that'll be
very
part
grateful.
of your fourth quarter revision. So we're currently doing that fourth quarter revision now, so that will be all picked up in that total review of his whole business unit.
And when would we sort of be able to get that information,
Craig, when
that
can we do
fourth
that?
quarter? Thank you. Thank you, yeah.
Okay, just so I just say I can see, the JJ's account for April hasn't been processed yet, so we are only looking at 9/12 of the year in that account. That's
So
just
the
one of
the
those.
April accruals aren't in yet, Peter.
So we've only last one's is 31st of March. So that's the trouble with some of those straight lines, and that one does take and it's in excess of
120,000 still to come in.
yeah. Feels contracts will be in that.
So just in relation to the waste collection contract, that means there's still another 3 months to come in, Mr. Mayor, and that would equate in the ballpark of another $400,000.
In total, 400,000.
420, but I'm
So,
rounding.
I mean, if we just run some numbers around this quickly now, 2.85 at the moment. There's another 400 that hasn't come in yet. That'll push us out to 3.25. We've then got another almost 400K in admin recoupment. That puts us up to about 3.65. And then, Peter, we've got some other additional costs. So I'm just trying to reconcile that 4.8 to where we're at now. But happy to leave that and take it away and come
Look,
back if you like,
what
Craig.
The easiest thing is obviously that's one line item, which obviously is very confusing. But we'll break that down into exactly what the amounts are and allocate those so you can clearly see them.
Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, other councillors, anything on expenditure before we move up to revenue and the rating model? If not, might hand over to you, Selena, just to go back up to the rating model and the revenue. Thank you.
So this one is based on the discussions we had on Monday with the changes to the collections and waste management levy. So in this model, in the background on Monday, we changed the domestic to 198, which was that $30 increase. We also changed the commercial to that 198, which was only a $10 increase. The Bunya Mountains, we discussed at the 216 to cover costs, which was the $48 increase, and waste management levy has no change. It remained at 162.50. So with those in the background, you can see your income statement that you've run a surplus every year, and you've actually run a surplus to cover your principal payment of your loans, because it sits around about $70,000. We spoke about the added expenses. So if you want to scroll down to, you're in your cash flow, no cash flow, up, sorry, there, yep. So with your cash flow, you still remain cash positive in every year. We haven't made any decisions around your capital, so you've still got the $850,000 sitting in there for your capex in next year. That will change the balances, and potentially maybe you might drop your out-year percentages by about 1%, maybe for the waste management levy, depending on where that lands. You can see you've got your repayments of borrowing of about $70,000 that run out. The loans run out in year 9. The opening cash balance is an estimate of where we think we're going to land at 30 June, so that's not a set number. It was just where we thought at that time when we started modelling. With the $850,000 spend next year for CapEx, you will reduce your restricted cash by the $721,921.
It's if we spend the 8, or if we do an Ango Weybridge and Maidenwell Transfer Station, yeah. But if we didn't do those, then we would remain cash positive at the 3.4 million, less the 721. So yeah, that 2.7 million would go up by 850, wouldn't it, if we didn't spend that? I'm just saying, if hypothetically, if council decided to do that, yeah, okay. So, so just the next question then, in terms of that 10-year cash flow forecast modelling, are there any major capex issues coming our way in waste, other than the Nango Weybridge, Craig? What else have we got sort of on the horizon? I know you're talking about Mergen in 7 years' time. Could you give us a bit of an insight as to what you might see coming
So
there?
through you, Mr. Mayor, up in the 2028, 2029, that's there's some big numbers starting to come through there. That's actually the establishment of the bulk waste transfer station. That's been mooted, that when we're going to have to start carting the waste. Now, as in around initially within the Shire and then outside of that. Now, if the waste levy starts to bite, like if there's no annual prepayment from 2022 onwards, then we might see a change in the behaviour of domestic waste generation. That could actually have some positive outcomes on the amount of waste that's being disposed of, which will have a positive outcome on some of these numbers, that when we actually have to start doing this extra capital works, we can push that back. There has been some discussion too, if we do end up doing or considering doing curbside, that might buy another year or another 2 years that you can push those costs out further. And obviously, the further we can push those costs out, then the better of the less percentage increment that we need to be collecting now or between now and those costs to be able to accumulate those amounts. So anything we can be doing to offset or push those out a year amounts further away, then the better it will be.
And just in terms of curbside recycling, let's say in 12 months' time, council decide to go to yellow lids. What's the capital cost of putting, sorry, Craig, if we went to curbside recycling, I believe there's 10,500 roughly wheelie bin pickups at the moment across the region. If we went to yellow lids, I think the yellow lids, aren't they, Mr. CEO? The yellows for recycling, that'd be another 10,500 bins. Do we have to buy those, or are they, is that a capital cost that we'd incur if we decided to do that?
So normally what happens is with the collection cost from the contractor, they'll bundle that all up in one price for you. So for example, the price that we got back in 2013 leading into the 2014 contract, the price or one of the prices from the contractors was $80 a year. So that was going to provide you with, they would do the bin rollout, they would provide the trucks and the infrastructure to collect the recyclables, to sort them, or not sort them, but to aggregate them and then take them off to a MRF, whether that was the Cherbourg MRF or whether that was the MRF down in SEQ, which was the way we worded the contract was whatever Cherbourg can't process, that was to go somewhere else, which they were looking to take it to SEQ. And they have it, or in their price to us has already incurred whatever revenue they were going to get. So all the costs, all the revenue, it comes to you at just one rate.
And so, Craig, what you're saying is so all that capital cost of that bin, it's just built into the annual payment.
The contractor ultimately wears all those CapEx costs.
They wear those upfront costs.
That doesn't show on your balance sheet. It just, what shows is the one operational expense that they charge us for whatever 80 divided by 26 equals. That was effectively what you'd be paying, or the rate payer would be paying for their collection of their wheelie bin, and that's what you'd be putting on the rates. So whatever the contractor's charging us, you want to charge that, so it doesn't have any impact on your CapEx on your balance sheet.
So sorry, how much was that per year to have that service?
$80 for a fortnightly wheelie bin collection. So
$80 by 26.
So if somebody's got a calculator, what's $80?
Oh, sorry, so it's $80 a fortnight to have one.
No, $80 a year. So I was just going to break it down to a fortnightly amount for you, as in the cost to pick up one recycle wheelie bin was going to cost $3.07. So
Per
weekly,
fortnight?
Per fortnight.
So we're only talking $80 a year
Yes,
to have a yellow lid collected.
correct.
Really?
That's what it was back in 2013.
Oh, goodness. I didn't realise it was so economical. Goodness. Oh, well, we're clearly going to be having a serious conversation about recycling over the course of the next 12 months then, I would think, because we were talking earlier, Manager Craig, about the waste levy and the cost to your department of having to manage the amount of fill and the airspace you've got left for compaction moving forward. And we're just looking at perhaps what point does it tip where you're actually better off to do the recycling, because the cost benefit at the $80 a year, the benefit of that outweighs, the savings on the landfill. Yeah.
A few years ago, it was previous council. They did ask us to go back to the contractor and ask for a new price, what it would cost to introduce curbside recycling. At that stage, we did do that, and that was also around when the levy was being mooted. And we did do some calculations that the cost savings to putting that into landfill, I think it accounted for $10 per wheelie bin service. So instead of paying $80, if council wanted to pass that entire cost saving on to that property owner, that to them the cost would have been $70 instead of $80. Alternatively, if that $10 council could have also banked that for offset the other costs. So it was not going to totally pay for the costs, but it was certainly something, while the prepayment exists, that you would have got benefited $10. So it's still going to cost the user of that service something, but when you look at $3.07 or $1.50 per week, and that was what the then mayor at the time said, look, when you look at it in isolation, it's cheaper than a cup of coffee per fortnight to have a recycling service. But that was one of the things he said he was going to regret not introducing curbside, because at the time there was $200 road levy, there was a fee for the wastewater, one for the new STP, new STP, and it was that additional $80 on top of all those other amounts, which in isolation it's only $80. Yeah, let's do it. But it was when in the bigger context of $200 for this, $150 for that, another $150 for this, the general rate increase, and at that time the decision was made that wasn't something that they needed to do. Having said that, yeah, I mean that's all the benefits and the cons for doing that.
Thank you, Craig. That's been very enlightening, actually, what you've just shared there. And of course, if council is able to, if we're able to find more efficiencies and reduce our costs and keep those big chunky rate increases or levy increases down, we might be able to create an environment where we can actually introduce that $80 in a different context, where we're not then loading that up on top of other increases. So when we increase our rates, or when we increase our charges in here on this rating model, council, remember that by doing that, you may be taking away the opportunity, as that previous mayor had done, to actually then get the recycling program working that you want. Because you might be lifting the rates up to a level where there's going to be no capacity to then add the $80 on top, which from an environmental and land management, dump land management point of view, may actually be shooting ourselves in the foot. So we've got to be careful about what sort of platform we lay over the next couple of years or the next 12 months with our rates, because if we start putting up to too much, the capacity to whack the extra $80 in may be very limited. So I just think we need to take that in context. And that being the case then, Craig, would it be fair to say that, in your professional opinion, as time moves on now, as time moves forward, with what you're seeing out there and the way that governments are increasing waste levies and the pressure you're under with, all the environmental stuff around landfill, etc., would it be fair to say that 1080, that'll rebalance over time? We'll see the $10 a year increase, just simply due to the cost of managing waste and the regulatory costs around that with levy increases, etc.
So
Would that be fair or not?
To answer that question, Mr. Mayor, a couple of things. One, just to be clear, the $80 was a 2013 figure. I would be surprised if it's $80 in today's terms. So we just need to be careful that, well, you said it was $80. It was $80 in 2013. Moving forward in relation to the comment about instead of it being $80, it could have been $70. That's on the saving that you would have made for it not going to landfill. Because all waste that goes to landfill, there is a levy of $85 a tonne now that gets charged by the state that you have to pay to the state. So the recyclables that didn't go to landfill, it would effectively be a saving of $10. Now, if after 2022, the prepayment stops, which I'm thinking that's what will happen, that there's not going to be any saving per se to council by doing that, because they're not going to be giving you the money. So what will really happen is the whole reason for the introduction of the state waste levy is a financial disincentive for waste to be going to landfill. So what's going to start to happen is it's going to really start to bite, whether at the moment, commercial is the only one that gets hit hard, because the state's paying the cost on behalf of the domestic user. If they stop that money, it's going to bite to the domestic user. So all the more reason they're going to be keen to seeing that then their waste isn't going to go to landfill. Will we ever get to see the stage that the difference will be equivalent to what the cost of providing the recycling is? In order for that to happen, the $85 is probably going to have to be ramped up significantly into the realms of, like Sydney, of $200 odd or something crazy, Do I see that happening in the short term in the state of Queensland? I will be really surprised. They're moving in little steps and they're moving in that direction, but are they going to crank it up that high, that quick? I would be very surprised. So I think that the cost of recycling, unfortunately, will not pay for itself in the short term, that the users of that service will unfortunately be having to pay something for that service.
Basis, it's primarily going to be a social decision rather than a financial decision for
Yes.
council. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
May I just on a practical matter, due to factors as much as we'd like to be, we will have key staff that have to leave today at 5. So there's a couple of external factors affecting that, which I won't go into. So whatever we do today, we will, if I may suggest and be so bold, we will have to wrap this one up today at 5. So
To see how if the councillors want to stay on, can we do that?
you can,
staff.
but we would be then stopping the meeting, or we're just chatting then.
Oh well, that's fine. Let's see how we go. I suppose we'll be guided by council when we get there, if you like. Yeah. No, that's fine. You've got key people that need to be gone at 5 o'clock, so I fully understand. Okay, that's fine. All right, so let's get up to the rating model. Celine, sorry, Councillor Potter, did you have a question before we do that?
Oh, look, I can actually go and see Craig later and ask him and have a chat with him about it if you like, so we can keep the meeting going.
Thanks. Are you sure you don't know?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
my
hold
main,
out.
sorry, I will ask it then. So my main concern was that the money that the 2.7, does that go into restricted cash for later use to hold in restricted for the landfill later on for the 2028, 2029? And do we have a rough cost or you're still working on that model? And also, the tender, I'm gathering the tender is up for renewal for the waste next year, is that right?
1st of July 2022.
Yep, okay, good, thank you.
So to answer those three questions, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll go backwards. The money that any surplus, and this is built into our rating model, that it includes the operational expenses plus any of that CapEx program. So we have our CapEx program out to actually 20 years, and all those costs of capping, water sampling, the existing or old landfills is all built into that. And so I'm very happy to say that those figures that you generate within the program stay within the program. They don't get excised off somewhere else. So we, any of those surpluses, they are earmarked for waste services expenses. Second question was CapEx. We have, so the CapEx numbers, they've been worked up based on current understanding and discounted back. So we're talking about real dollars in real terms. That was put together by a external company who do this as a rule of thumb. They understand the costs associated with doing those capping and water sampling expenses. So to our understanding, and this was something we had to do for the auditors to get a real understanding, is this an estimate or is this a guesstimate or is this actually a real number that we're dealing with for the provision for the liability side of things? And the first question, which was, or did I answer the first? Yes. So if you look at where in that cash flow section where it talks about investing activities, those line items are actually our CapEx program. So that 850 in next financial year is the Weybridge $500,000 and the Maidenwell transfer station 350, and then out at so 2028, 2029, that's 6.4 mil. That's the bulk waste transfer station. And then that 1.9 is the beginning of the closure of Mergen and or Kingaroy.
Just the other day at our workshop on Monday, we spoke about the potential of that $500,000 capital spend on that Weybridge, like understanding the how many times we've exceeded our limit, and if we could potentially defer that for another year. Is there any new information about that, or will there be more information come back around that? Because certainly if we could push that out.
So thank you for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I had a phone call late yesterday afternoon with one of the directors from DES about that particular issue. It went for about 45 minutes, so he actually did listen to what our circumstances were. He gave some positive sounds to the effect that there might be some additional funding money. However, the problem that first needs to be resolved is the pending due date for the weighbridge to be in. They will not pay any money retrospectively. So that's where he said he was happy to get the Director for Compliance and the Director for Funding and the Director for Environmental Authorities, and to have a discussion about us reducing our licence limit, which I explained to him, happy to consider that idea because that will get us out of hot water at least for now, in which case we can defer that for at least 12 months. If there is some funding comes through, and it would most likely be 70-30. And I said, mate, if you can get us 70-30, then where do I sign? And he said, so I said, but my reservation to committing to signing down the licence limit is because our overall strategy is when Mergen fills up, Mergen's waste will come to Nanango, and therefore we need to make sure we've got 5,000 to 10,000 limit. And my understanding from my compatriots around local government is once you guys reduce down, if I want to increase it, you open up all the license limits and it's like it's a brand new application. So if you can give me a guarantee, sir, that you won't do that, then where do I sign? And he said, well, I can't give you that guarantee at the present moment in time. However, what I am committing to is he will organise a meeting with the people that we need to have a talk to, which will give me the platform to have a conversation about this is our big picture, this is our small bump on the way. What commitments can you give us if we're going to do this in order to make that happen so that the funding can flow and then allow us without undue conditions being loaded up on us to actually be able to go back. Because I said to him, at the end of the day, if you don't allow a more flexible approach to us trying to close up these landfills, which will get a much better environmental outcome in the end, is we go, that's fine. Well, then we'll just play ball with what we have to do and we'll just poddle along, and you're then going to have these facilities that are still operating and you're not getting as good an environmental outcome as what you could. So if we're all trying to be adult and mature about this, if we're trying to get the best outcome, then there needs to be a little bit of give from them. So it was a positive conversation. I can't say that, yes, we're all good, but it wasn't bad news and wasn't badly received, and he was at least understanding of where the position was and was making positive noises. So I'm hoping that we'll have another meeting within a week or two, and then I'll be able to report back to council, hopefully. Ideally, we might be going to reduce initially, so we get over the initial bump, and then there could be some good news about some additional funding, which means we may only have to find 150,000 rather than the full 500. And if we can make some cost savings along the way, so instead of it being 500, maybe it's 450, then everybody benefits for that cost saving. So he seemed quite, and I said, look, don't get me wrong, we're not here just to burn money because we can. I said, the reason this whole situation's all come about is because we tried to minimise our costs at the beginning, and now it seems we're being penalised for that. So please rest assured that we're trying to spend the best or get the best bang for our buck wherever that might be.
Thanks very much for that work, Craig. Yeah, well done. That's excellent. Let's keep happy that moves in the right direction. Yeah, Councillor, okay, there's no more questions. Let's go up to the rating revenue model, Selena, and have a look at that. And the one question I had on that is, where's the 100K dividend built into the expenses? Is that in finance costs? Or is it
That's-
over in the cash flow?
It'd be sitting in the materials and services in the
Oh,
income
the
statement.
100K dividend is in materials and services.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
right, good. So it's in there. All right, so what's scenario 9?
This is the one that we workshopped on Monday, and this was where we had the change to your domestic and your commercial up to 198. Bunya Mountains, 216 to cover the cost for the gated community, and the waste management levy, there was no change, and it remained at 162.50.
That being the case, committee, I sort of suggested that we have a look at what are our options around the collections. If we were able to do something with collections that could enable us to hold the waste management levy at 162.50, or at least mitigate it to a low percentage. The only reason for that is, and there's two arguments here, one might say let's spread it across the whole 18,000 rateable properties. The other argument is let's not burden the rural producers anymore by increasing the levy when we know that the majority of our costs is in our urban centres. So that was really just to put up an option to say, well, look, if we don't burden the farmers and everybody with the increasing the levy, what does that mean for our collections increases to get us into surplus? Sorry, Selena, I just want to point out to the councillors why we've put that option there. Okay, so where does that leave us then, Selena, if we were to adopt that?
So, Lynelle, you're talking revenue or what the dollar changes and
Bo-
percentage?
Yeah, so first of all, if we just go to revenue, let's go to
Yep.
the revenue and the
So you
bottom
s-
line.
You'll see in the rates levy charges line, under recurrent revenue, you've got your 5.134, plus there's the additional 247,000. And the reason that there's two lines is the ledger already has some stuff entered into the ledger, and then I actually generate it through the rates model in Excel. So I just put a formula in there to pick the additional or the less, depending on what the rating strategy is.
That being the case, if we were to adopt that, if council was to ultimately adopt that model, what you're saying is that you could pay a $100,000 dividend back to GenOps and still have a $108,000 surplus in waste.
That's correct.
Assuming there were no changes to the expenses.
That's correct. And then that covers your principal part of your payment.
And that 108 covers that 73,000 you got to
So
do.
I
You need to
wouldn't-
pay your loan. Okay.
Yeah, and so regardless of whether you decide to go ahead with the 850 capital, you probably wouldn't change your rating strategy anyway, because at this point you're only just covering your principal payment. So by the time you take the 73,000 out, you've probably only got about a 40,000 surplus.
Just wanting to, again, are we in a position then to be able to, can you adjust on there? I mean, have you got that? Can we run that live and
I
play
could
with
run
numbers?
it live, but I'd need to log into where Lynelle is to be able to call it up, and I don't know that I can do that while she's doing a live meeting.
Okay, righto. No, that's fine.
But we could do it on the Monday afternoon if you want to run through them live again on the Monday afternoon.
Yeah, Mr. CEO, could we do that another time? If that's possible. Okay, well, we can do that later. So that includes increasing the domestic wheelie bin from 168 per year to 198 a year, a $30 rise, which is 17%. Commercial from 188 up to 198, a $10 rise. And of course, Bunya Mountains, well, I think we've pretty well committed. We're going to have to do that just to cover costs. Okay, well, it's open to the councillors. What are your thoughts on that? I guess for me, one of the options would be to look at, well, if we didn't take the dividend and pulled the 100,000 out, how much scope would that then give us to bring back the 198 and the 188? But I guess, Selena, we've got 10,500 wheelie bins, haven't we? And that's residential, Craig, is it? That's not commercial. Do we know how many commercial we've got?
There's about 2,000 commercial, 1,800 commercial.
Okay, 1,800. So we're talking about, 12,500 total
Yes.
wheelie bins across both. So if we were to bring that back to 188, we're going to lose $20 by 12,500. Yeah, that'll be too much, won't it? Okay, that's all right. Okay, well, councillors, what are your thoughts on that level of increase? Do you feel that we need to look at the waste management levy being increased by some amount, a small amount, of 2%? 2% would take it up to 165, which is $3 per property, which across 18,000 properties is $54,000. Just throwing some options up for debate, conversation. Sorry, Councillor Frolov. Yeah, Ros. Yep.
Sorry, Mayor. The waste management levy, are you meaning that everyone pays, every ratepayer pays that waste management, or were you just saying just the urban person?
Oh no, everyone. Yeah,
Everyone?
I was just trying to just mitigate the effect on the farmers. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the dividend, the 100,000 dividend goes back into general operations. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that, yeah, I'm out two minds here because the three areas that we're looking at putting up, water, waste and sewerage, I just feel that the urban ratepayer will be carrying the brunt of this budget, not the rural person, because as they say, rural people, I know they're and I don't pay water and I don't pay sewage. I've just got a rubbish bin, so I should be sitting here being quiet because it's going to work well in my favour. But I find it that we're looking at these three areas, and not just because they're in my area, but they were hit last budget to save a zero rate increase in the general ops. And I'm kind of concerned that what we're looking at the moment, we're really putting pressure on these services that they've got to do they've got to do the high standards that everyone wants, but we're really giving them the purse strings of a sow's ear to work on at the moment. And I just don't see that the urban ratepayer should have to have the main brunt of this budget, where the rural person is asset rich and money poor, and I think it has to be fair, equal, straight across the board somehow.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Frolov. And there are two perspectives on that. The other side to the argument, and just to play, just for the sake of debating, playing devil's advocate, is that one could say that the increases imposed on rural landholders by previous councils have been quite significant. I know in some little test cases I've done in comparison to what farmers in Yarraman are paying compared to what rural landholders in Blackbutt are paying, I've noticed there is a big difference in the amount of rates that our rural landholders are paying. I suppose that's the first argument. And the second one is that does council want to move, or think it's appropriate to move to a user pays model, whereby if you live in town and you're having your been collected, well, you should pay. If you're getting water supplied to your house, well, you should pay for that. That's moving towards more of a user pays model rather than a broad brush, let's levy everybody across the region, whether they're using the service or not. So there's two arguments there, I guess, isn't it? It's a philosophical position that I guess council has to settle on at some point in time. But I'll go to Councillor Shoemaker, but I'm also keen to hear what Councillor Henson has to say about this debate as a rural portfolio holder. But Councillor Shoemaker, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the moment, I'd like to probably ground truth that domestic wheelie bin charge against other regions. I think we did do some of that work. How we stack up in comparison to other regions our size, is that
We were under. I just have to find the document.
yeah. Can you pull that up, Selena? I think that's sort of how we originally got to this. I'm looking at it, like I've done the calculation. I'm very mindful. It's 57 cents a week for a domestic wheelie bin user. The increase we're proposing, if I've done my maths right, $30 across the 52 weeks of the year. And in terms of the waste management levy, I'm thinking perhaps CPI of 1.1%, just purely because of those clear cost increases with EBA and materials and services. I'm mindful, I originally was sitting in the space of, I didn't think waste should pay a dividend. However, after having the conversations about water and wastewater and recognising that those business units return a profit for profit's not the right word, but they return on the investment that council has made on those facilities and those large capital spends. So I can kind of see now the flip side to that, where, you know, waste has significant assets tied up within it. There is significant spend in those later years. And so I've probably shifted my mind thinking that those assets should have a return if they are to be sustainable. That's probably my thinking, but I would like to understand how our domestic charge, I feel like we've done that work, but there's been so many numbers track around how that does weigh up in the broader
Some numbers
sense.
here. Yeah, thanks. Can I just, sorry, Councillor Matt. So North Burnett, neighbours up the road, is 200, Mr CEO's just provided this information off the system. This is off their revenue statement. So this is in this last year, this current year we're in now. $295 a year for their domestic wheelie bin, $357 a year for their commercial wheelie bin. $357. So we're at 168 at the moment. They're at 295 on residential. We're at 188 at the moment on commercial. They're at 357 at the moment on commercial.
Just to clarify that, Mr. Mayor, that's the figure for us to collect the bin. Commercial also get the waste levy on top of that. So our 2021-22 financial year proposed commercial fee is actually $250.
Yeah, so sorry.
So just
yeah, so
comparing
sorry,
apples with apples.
Yeah, sorry, you're right, Craig. We're 243, including on top, including that. At the moment, they're 357. So 168 to 295 and 243 to 357. No, 168 at the moment we are.
What we're paying now.
We're currently at 168, yeah. If we were to go to 198, we'd be competitive at 295. I'm not sure, though, if they have a waste management levy as well, would they? Can we see? Yeah.
Could we, you've got all the data there, like another couple of councils who are surrounding us, I think.
Yeah, Lynelle, have we got that come up?
Mindful
when we're
North
at-
Burnett's a bit smaller than us, so they might have some more costs
Good point.
involved. So yeah, if we can have a broad look.
Can we see, for example, can we see Gympie, for example, or Dalby? There we are with Dalby. So Dalby, which column is it? It's the far right column is 362 is Dalby's residential wheelie bin. So all the Western Downs ones look like they're 362, aren't they? $349 for Bundaberg. We're just going to have a look at Gympie and what they charge per year for their. So Gympie's per year cost for their wheelie bin residential is $292. I'm just wondering, can we clarify, do they also pay a waste management levy on top? We currently pay $162.50 in waste management levy, or would that be factored into that? That's probably the one variable. Can we just check that at some stage? Thanks, Selena. So Southern Downs, down at Warwick and surrounds is 103, is it? 308 for Alla at Southern Downs. So Caboolture's $237 a year. Certainly be interesting to do an analysis to see whether they charge a waste levy on top of that, and if so, how much is that? And then what is the total cost? How does the total cost then compare for waste services in total for our residences and commercial operators compared to these other townships? I agree with Councillor Shoemaker. I think that's a really important bit of work to do before we make a decision on this, if we're going to be able to take this out to the community. The other bit of work, I suppose, in behind this is to look at whether there is scope to do that forensic look at our materials and services and perhaps bring that down, maybe reconsider the $100,000 dividend even inside that, and whether then we want to adjust. If we do want to mitigate, as Councillor Frolof's saying, the burden on the urban ratepayers, is there scope then to perhaps actually need less revenue if we can bring materials and service down through taking the dividend out or other measures, and thereby bring that 198 perhaps back to a lower figure, similarly with the commercial, and then maybe look at a CPI on the waste management levy. I think there's more work we've got to do, but before we can really settle on some numbers there. Yeah. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So for starters, they've got us, you've got down here as 165 for us when we're 168. So I'm just wondering how old, so this is the previous year. So some of these numbers may have actually gone up since then anyway with the, okay. Alrighty, yeah, okay. So the other questions are, hang on, I'm not just trying to figure out where I wrote my questions, sorry. So with regards to, oh, here we go. So I actually agree that it should be at least a CPI increase for the waste management levy. But I would like to see what this actual increase for this means, and also added to that to rates, just to see what the full picture is on an actual rates notice is. Because we're adding here, we're going to add in water, and I would just like to see an overall comparison from last year to this year's rates notice, because that's the bottom line, and that's what we get judged on.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. It's a
Yeah,
CEO.
fair enough, Councillor. The thing that, if I probably will come back to point, is holding us up now is that we need to start pumping some of this stuff into the system. So like whether council changes are going, there's a bit of modelling that goes with it. But to bring those numbers back again, this committee isn't making the final decision. That will be the budget meeting. I would like to think we'll have it all pretty much, we're all of a similar mind without having an inappropriate decision made before the budget meeting, but there's general consensus in how to get to that point. Certainly, with the rough numbers we've got, we can, I think I'm looking at Selena, and we can give a bit of a, if what's been discussed is adopted, what would that look like? Is that a good way to put it? Yeah. Yeah,
I think so,
okay,
Mr.
yeah.
CEO. I think that's a really great position to take, is that if that was adopted, what would it look like? So that could come back. And so, for example, if we looked at a scenario 10, Selena, whereby we went CPI on the waste management levy, as councillors are indicating. I'm just having trouble pinning that number down with the economists, but you're getting different figures. It's not going to go 2%. It won't, no.
It's about 1.1 is
went
the,
1.1 yesterday.
yeah. That's my understanding of it. 1.1 on the quarter. Yeah.
So 1.1 is a CPI at this stage, at least, on the levy. Bunya Mountains as is, cost recovery. And then if we were to pull out the 100K dividend, where would those domestics and commercials need to land to get us to the point where we have a $74,000 surplus only, which just covers our principal. I guess that's a scenario 10, just picking up on what Councillor Froelich was saying about hurting, and also what Councillor Potter's saying about this is going to accumulate. Might only be $30 here, but when we add water and sewerage, it could blow out to $100. So, which is a big percentage. Just wanting to put that there. How's the committee feeling about that as a scenario 10 coming back on Monday afternoon with some more information, Selena, in relation to what the other councils are charging on domestic and commercial in total, including levy and collection?
Yep, that's okay. So I just had a quick look at the 18-19, which was the only one that I could find on the separate special rate charges, and there looks like there's not a lot. Lockyer Valley charge waste collection, commercial dual bins, waste only, domestic dual bins. So they have quite a few extra separate rates. Hinchinbrook have a waste management levy in 18-19 was $154.10. Yeah, they're the only ones that I can find that actually have a waste management levy. But
Okay.
I can collate the stuff that Linnell had up and put that into a table and get rid of all the ones that we don't really need to look at, so that there's some comparison there. But it doesn't look like a lot of the other councils have the waste management levy at a first glance, yeah.
Yeah, right. So currently where we're sitting at 168 on collection and 162 on levy, we're really looking there at 330 a year when they're combined. So yeah, we need to have that information before we make that decision. Can we also, in doing that, Craig, can we have a look at that materials and services, Peter, and see whether, in all good faith, there's an opportunity? I mean, you've been great so far to continue on looking at that with councillors as to whether there's scope, maybe based on current year to dates, with those extra costs coming through. If we pull out the $100,000 dividend, can we get that down any further to try and mitigate the pressure on our ratepayers to get you to a point where we can actually get you into that, $75,000 surplus to pay your principal repayments? That'd be appreciated if you could do a bit more analysis on that materials and services account and come back with some further detail around what makes that up compared to this current year. That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Other councillors before we look to move on and ultimately wrap up? Okay. So, Mr. CEO, just on 6.2, do we need a recommendation out of that, or can we just let that lie?
So, Mr. Mayor, this is a committee, and you probably noticed last week we didn't lay them on the table because if they're not finalised, they're just not finalised. So, yes, no, they will be.
So could I suggest that we just let that one roll through? We'll have further committee meetings and we can come back to it with that further information to hand. That'd be appreciated. Thanks very much, Manager Craig and Selena, everybody involved. Okay, Mr. CEO, just in light of the fact that I know we've got staff that do have to go at 5 o'clock. They've got other commitments. It's 10 to 5. We've got Tim waiting there patiently with water and wastewater. Aaron, what are your thoughts? Yes. Happy to defer to next Wednesday? So, councillors, yeah, send through RFIs to Aaron if we can try and, if we can, Aaron, I'm not to direct you, but if they just email, are you happy? Are you happy if councillors just email your questions? Just the RFI process doesn't really work when we're doing budgets because we've got such tight time frames. So, I guess, councillors, do as much preparatory work on water and waste as you can. We have got documents already given to us. Can we go away, have a look through those numbers, highlight and identify the things you have questions on, get them through to General Manager, me and ASAP to give him enough notice to hopefully come back with some clarification next Wednesday. That might just make this expedited, make this a more thorough process. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I did find workshopping waste on Monday afternoon a really good exercise, like coming into this meeting much clearer about where we were heading. So I would be very supportive of workshopping water and wastewater on Monday afternoon and then coming back to committee, giving us a little bit of time to think between those meetings. I've found that really valuable this week, actually having the discussion on a Monday, shelling out some ideas and then coming back much clearer in my mind by the Wednesday. So if there's an option to table those two on Monday afternoon at our workshop, that would be really good.
Yeah, so Mr. CEO, if we looked at workshopping waste and water on wastewater, that's provide information. Let's not we won't get into debate, we won't make any decisions. It'll just be an information sharing forum in preparation for the committee meeting on the Wednesday, if that's okay.
That's fine, Mayor, but also I'm going to start to push to start getting some of the other communities, because we've got other departments sitting in queue, and we've had waste and wastewater now for about 3 weeks. And so it's, so it's thanks for the feedback, Councillor, because actually I was pretty chuffed with Monday afternoon, because it's just good. And that was the explanation I was giving. If we can workshop it, and happy questions, emails, send them in and workshop them on the Monday, and then just information only, and then bring them to the committee on the Wednesday.
And then councillors, if we can help with the process by identifying your questions earlier and trying to get them through to Aaron on email, that way we're not taking so much time at these budget committees in fielding questions and then having to try and take them on notice. We just keep having to come back all the time. So if we can do that body of work ourselves before next Wednesday, including on Monday, that'd be great. Okay, that being the case, we'll now defer all of the remaining items, 6.2 to 6.4, to a future budget committee meeting. And there's nothing in the confidential section at item 7, so I'll now move to close this budget committee meeting at 4:54 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance and have an enjoyable rest of evening. Thank you.